After my husband cheated with our billionaire investor, her husband found me. I was standing in the shadows of a VIP golf club in Austin, watching Derek pull Stella close. My hands were shaking, but not from heartbreak. Before I could march out there and scream, Julian Thorne stepped into my path, the cybersecurity king. He didn't offer pity. He just looked at me and said, "You just lost your algorithm. Marry me tomorrow, and I'll give you the admin rights to wipe them out." I only needed 3 seconds to say yes. For 5 years, my entire world was confined to a cramped, windowless garage on the outskirts of Austin. The air in that room always smelled of overheated servers and stale energy drinks. While the rest of the city slept, I was awake, staring at the harsh blue light of dual monitors, or writing the core architecture for a predictive data algorithm that would change the industry. I was the engine. Derek was just the paint job. He couldn't write a single line of Python if his life depended on it. But he knew how to wear a custom-tailored suit. He knew how to walk into a room of venture capitalists, flash that charismatic smile, and sell my sleepless nights as his own visionary genius. I didn't mind. I preferred the quiet of the back end. I trusted him to handle the front end of our lives. We were co-founders. We were husband and wife. I believed we were building an empire together. I didn't realize I was just building my own digital coffin. Exactly 1 week ago, the late-night silence of our office was broken when Derek rushed in. He looked completely exhausted, his tie loosened, his hair a mess. He dropped a thick stack of legal documents right on top of my keyboard. "Clara, I need you to sign these right now," he had said, his voice thick with manufactured panic. "The VC compliance team is tearing us apart in due diligence. They want to restructure the corporate entity before they wire the Series C funds. It is just a routine legal update, a formality to satisfy the board." I looked at the 50 pages of dense legal jargon. I was in the middle of debugging a critical latency issue. My eyes were burning. "If we do not get this filed by midnight, they will pull the term sheet," he pleaded, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. "Just sign on the last page, babe. Let me handle the suits. You just focus on the code. We are almost at the finish line." I signed it. I signed it because I loved him. Because I believed that the man who shared my bed would never construct a back door to destroy me. And then, this morning, the truth finally compiled. I had logged into the company's secure legal portal to pull a patent registration number. I clicked on the file named Corporate Restructure Update. When the PDF loaded on my screen, the words hit me harder than a physical blow. It was not a restructuring document. It was a complete, irrevocable intellectual property assignment agreement. Section 4, Paragraph 2. I read it over and over until the letters blurred. I, Clara Vance, hereby transfer all source code, algorithms, patents, and proprietary data to Holt Enterprises, an entity wholly and exclusively owned by Derek Holt. Every single line of code I had ever written, every brilliant solution I had engineered in the dead of night. My entire life's work. I had legally handed it all to him on a silver platter. The upcoming initial public offering that the media was calling the tech event of the decade, the billion-dollar valuation. I owned absolutely 0% of it. On paper, I was nothing more than an at-will employee, a disposable contractor he could terminate with a single email. There was no compliance emergency. There was only a greedy, talentless man plotting to steal a billion-dollar algorithm from the loyal wife who built it for him. Sitting there in the glow of my monitor, I did not cry. In my career as a data architect, I have audited millions of lines of complex code. I know how to spot hidden vulnerabilities. I build impenetrable firewalls. I patch catastrophic system errors before malicious hackers even know they exist. But ironically, and I completely missed the most fatal bug in my own system, my marriage to Derek. When I liquidated my personal savings to buy our first database servers, when I stayed awake for 72 hours straight to meet his arbitrary demo deadlines, I did not view it as a sunk cost. I viewed it as an investment in our future. I willingly transformed myself into a silent background process, quietly draining my own processing power so his user interface could shine perfectly. And my reward for that absolute loyalty was a legally binding execution. Derek did not just steal my equity. He corrupted my trust. He formatted my youth. But tears do not rewrite bad code. Panic does not decrypt a locked hard drive. At 32, after years of living inside logic gates and binary decisions, my mind instantly shifted into disaster recovery mode. When a critical network is compromised by a malicious virus, a system administrator only has one protocol. You do not sit down and negotiate with the malware. You do not ask the virus why it infected you. You quarantine the threat. You sever the connection. And you execute a hard reset. Derek Holt was the worst piece of malware I had ever allowed into my life. He thought I was just a naive coder who only understood variables and syntax. He thought he had already won. He forgot that I am the one who wrote the system, and I know exactly how to crash it. The sound of a golf club striking a ball snapped me back to the present. The Texas sun was blinding, reflecting off the manicured green of the 18th hole, but the chill inside my veins was absolute. I blinked, focusing my eyes back on the secluded patio. 30 yards away, Derek was laughing. He leaned in, whispering something into Stella Montgomery's ear, his hand casually resting on the exposed skin of her lower back. Stella smiled, sipping her champagne with the lazy arrogance of a woman who believed her family's venture capital fund could buy the world, including my husband, including my life's work. A normal woman would have stood up. A normal woman would have marched across that pristine grass, screamed at the top of her lungs, thrown a drink in his face, and demanded to know why. Why 5 years of sacrifice meant nothing. Why he stripped my name from the patent. Why her... But I did not move a single muscle. In behavioral economics, there is a concept known as the sunk cost fallacy. It is the irrational human tendency to continue investing in a losing proposition simply because of the time, money, or effort already spent. It is why gamblers keep betting after losing their life savings. It is why people stay in toxic relationships. They look at the 5 or 10 years they gave someone and think, I have invested too much to walk away now. I have to make this work. In systems engineering, we have a different term for it. A fatal loop. When an algorithm begins returning corrupted data, you do not sit there and negotiate with the code. You do not ask the server why it betrayed you. You do not pour more clean processing power into a garbage project. You recognize the corruption, you isolate the environment, and you execute a hard kill switch. My marriage to Derek was a sunk cost. The thousands of hours I spent writing code in that sweltering garage, the anniversary dinners skipped, the blind trust I handed him, all of it was gone. Written off, erased from the ledger. If I walked over to that table crying and demanding justice, I would just be pouring more of my dignity into a project that had already crashed. I am an architect. I do not cry over broken systems. I build new ones to override them. I slowly turned my gaze away from the cheating couple and looked back at the man sitting across from me in the shadows. Julian Thorne had not spoken a word during my silence. The cybersecurity billionaire simply watched me, his dark eyes calculating, assessing the processing speed of my realization. He was dressed in a sharp, dark navy suit that looked entirely out of place at a casual country club, radiating an aura of absolute, ruthless control. He was a predator, waiting to see if he had caught a victim or found a partner. And I assume you are finished processing the error report, Clara. His voice was low, devoid of any pity. That was exactly what I needed. Empathy is useless when you need to rebuild a firewall. I took a slow, deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my simple linen dress. The naive girl who signed away her intellectual property died the moment she read that document. The woman sitting here now was pure, unadulterated logic. I understand the variables, I replied, my voice steady and cold. Derek used my algorithm to secure Stella's funding. Stella used Derek to humiliate you. They think they have locked both of us out of our own systems." Julian leaned forward, resting his forearms on the wrought iron table. "My soon-to-be ex-wife is currently transferring massive amounts of illicit capital into your husband's startup to artificially inflate its valuation before the IPO. She has my board divided and my internal security teams compromised. I have the infrastructure of a global tech empire, but I need someone on the inside, someone who understands the exact architecture of Derek's system, someone who has the motive to burn it to the ground." He pushed a sleek, black keycard across the table. "Marry me tomorrow morning. Become the Chief Technology Officer of Thorn Apex. I will give you unlimited resources and absolute root access to my network. In exchange, you track down Stella's dirty money, expose Derek's fraud, and we trigger a system failure they will never recover from." I looked at the keycard. It was not just a piece of plastic. It was a loaded weapon. "This is a permanent merger, Julian," I said, meeting his intense stare without blinking. "If I do this, I do not report to your board. I do not ask for permission. I want full, unrestricted admin privileges. When I start deleting their assets, you do not interfere." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Julian's face. I would not expect anything less from the real genius behind Holt Enterprises. "You have your admin rights." I reached out and picked up the keycard. The cold plastic felt grounding against my palm. I did not look back at Derek. He was already obsolete. 3 seconds. That was all it took to calculate the risk, accept the terms, and compile the ultimate revenge protocol. "Deal," I said softly. The contract was sealed. The legacy system was officially shut down, and in the countdown to their total destruction had just begun. The next morning, the Texas sun reflected off the towering glass facade of Thorn Apex headquarters. I walked into the soaring lobby. I was no longer the invisible coder hiding in a garage wearing oversized hoodies. I wore a tailored graphite suit, my posture perfectly straight, my eyes locked dead ahead. The weight of the platinum security badge resting against my chest felt completely different from the cheap silicone wedding ring I had left on Derek's nightstand. Julian walked beside me. He did not hold my hand. He did not need to. The sheer authority radiating from him parted the sea of employees as we made our way to the private elevator. "Are you ready?" Julian asked softly as the doors slid shut. "I have been ready for 5 years." The elevator chimed at the 50th floor, and the central nervous system of the entire corporation. We stepped out into the engineering bay. It was a massive open floor plan, humming with the low vibration of server racks and the frantic typing of over 100 developers. The moment Julian stepped into the room, the typing stopped. A heavy silence fell over the floor. "Listen up," Julian announced, his voice echoing across the silent room. "This is Clara Thorn, my wife and the new Chief Technology Officer of Thorn Apex. Effective immediately, all network architecture, security protocols, and server access authorizations go through her." A murmur rippled through the sea of monitors. I scanned their faces. Near the back, sitting at a multi-screen workstation, was a man with slicked-back hair and an arrogant smirk. That was Marcus, the former lead systems architect. I had stayed up all night reviewing the company logs. Marcus was Stella's right hand inside the engineering department. He was the puppet who had purposely left the firewall vulnerable, allowing Stella to funnel millions in corporate funds out to Derek's startup under the guise of cloud hosting fees. I walked straight to his desk. The quiet click of my heels against the polished floor sounded like a ticking clock. "Hello, Marcus. I need your master encryption tokens, the admin passwords for the AWS infrastructure, and your physical server keys. Right now." Marcus leaned back in his ergonomic chair, crossing his arms. He looked at me with open amusement, clearly thinking I was just a billionaire's trophy wife playing boss. "Mrs. Thorne, handing over root access is a complex protocol. It takes days to transfer permissions. Besides, I report directly to the board of directors, which still includes Miss Montgomery. Your appointment is highly irregular. I need to confirm this directive with her first. He was stalling. He needed time to scrub the server logs and delete the back doors he had built for Stella. I smiled, placing a printed executive order, wet signed by Julian, flat on his desk. In the modern gold rush, people think money is power. They are wrong. Data is power. He who holds the root access writes the rules of the game. According to corporate bylaws, the CEO has the authority to make executive technical appointments during a critical security breach. Miss Montgomery is currently a minority shareholder with zero operational authority. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper of pure ice. Neem, if you do not hand over those keys in the next 30 seconds, I will write your termination letter for corporate espionage. Simultaneously, I will have the FBI Cyber Division seize your hard drives for suspected wire fraud. Your choice, Marcus, a quiet handover or leaving this building in handcuffs. The arrogant smirk vanished from his face. He looked past me toward Julian, but Julian simply stood there, arms crossed, watching me with quiet approval. Marcus's hands began to tremble. He opened his desk drawer and practically threw the physical security keys and the digital token onto the desk. I will pack my things. Good. I turned to face the rest of the stunned engineering floor. From this exact second, the network protocol changes. Any external data transfer over 1,000 megabytes requires my personal cryptographic signature. I started my career hunting anomalies in code. Do not try to hide a single byte from me. I immediately instructed the internal security team to revoke Marcus's access and physically escort him out of the building. Then, I sat down in his vacated leather chair. I plugged the master token into the terminal. Lines of code began cascading across all 3 monitors. To anyone else, it was a chaotic blur of green text. To me, it was a beautiful, transparent map. I traced the unauthorized API endpoints. I found the shadow servers. Stella had been siphoning operational budget, masking it as automated server maintenance, and routing the cash straight into Derek's startup accounts to artificially boost his valuation. It was a brilliant digital heist, but they made one fatal mistake. They left the digital footprints intact. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I did not just patch the vulnerability. I rewrote the network gateway. I highlighted every single IP address associated with Stella's dummy corporations and Derek's startup. I stared at the blinking cursor. This was it, the moment of execution. I hit the enter key. A satisfying chime echoed from the system. Access denied. The back door was permanently welded shut. The illicit cash flow was instantly severed. Almost immediately, the private line on the desk began to ring frantically. I let it ring 4 times before picking up the receiver. "What the hell did you just do?" Stella's voice shrieked through the speaker, cracking with pure panic. "My development accounts are frozen." I leaned back in the chair, staring at the clean, secure network topology on my screen. "Hello, Stella. I am just running a routine malware sweep. It seems the system detected a massive parasite draining our resources. I had to quarantine it." "You little," Stella screamed. "You think you can just waltz into Thorn Apex and lock me out of my own money?" "It is not your money anymore," I replied calmly. And I did not waltz in. I logged in as the Chief Technology Officer. You should probably call Derek. I imagine his startup is going to have a very hard time paying the electric bill tomorrow. I hung up the phone and disconnected the line. Julian walked over and placed a cup of black coffee on my desk. "You locked them out?" I took a sip of the bitter coffee, my eyes never leaving the monitors. "I did not just lock them out, Julian. I trapped them inside their own burning house. Now we watch them panic." The server room on the 50th floor was pitch black, except for the cool blue glow of my monitors. It was past midnight. The rest of the city was asleep, but I was wide awake, buried deep within the digital ledgers of Thorn Apex. To a normal person, the cascading lines of hexadecimal codes and transaction hashes would look like absolute chaos. To me, they were a perfectly structured narrative. They were a confession. Many people think that economic crimes are committed by invisible ghosts in the machine. They think millions of dollars can just vanish into thin air, untraceable and untouchable. But as a data architect, I know a fundamental truth about human nature. Greed is bottomless, but it always leaves a trace. Digital money does not spontaneously generate, and it does not magically evaporate. It simply shifts from one account to a shell company to a disguised wallet. I opened the quarterly expense reports for the marketing division. One line item immediately glared back at me: user acquisition costs. The budget had skyrocketed by 400% in just 6 months, a series of massive, decentralized payments, all routed to a single third-party vendor network. I ran a reverse trace on the vendor IDs. Stella had been incredibly arrogant. She was funneling corporate funds out of Thorn Apex, converting them into cryptocurrency, and sending them directly into Derek's startup. They thought they were untouchable. Derek had always bragged about the absolute anonymity of the blockchain, and he believed that because a crypto wallet does not have a physical name attached to it, he was completely invisible. He thought he was a ghost. But Derek was a salesman, not an engineer. He fundamentally misunderstood the technology he was using. Cryptocurrency is decentralized, yes, but it is also a public ledger. Every single transaction, every fraction of a coin, is permanently recorded, verified, and locked into the chain. It is an indelible footprint preserved for eternity. If you know how to read the terrain, there is nowhere to hide. I cracked my knuckles and began to hunt. I pulled the transaction hashes from Stella's approved vendor payouts, long, meaningless strings of letters and numbers. I fed them into a custom tracking script I had written years ago in that sweltering garage. On a script Derek claimed was too boring to pitch to investors, the numbers began to align on my screen. I was not just tracking data. I was mapping the exact psychology of a betrayal. The money flowed out of Thorn Apex under the guise of marketing expenses. It hit a series of offshore digital wallets controlled by Stella. From there, it was tumbled, broken into thousands of microtransactions to mask the origin. But a river always finds its way back together. I watched the digital streams reconnect, pooling into 3 massive cold wallets. I cross-referenced the receiving wallets with the public funding announcements of Holt Enterprises. The dates matched flawlessly. The exact day Stella authorized a $10 million marketing expense, Derek's startup miraculously announced a $10 million anonymous angel investment. And it was a perfect closed loop of money laundering. Stella stole from her husband to artificially inflate the valuation of my husband's stolen company. The heavy steel door of the server room clicked open. I did not look up. I knew the rhythm of those footsteps. Julian walked in, carrying 2 cups of black coffee. He set one down next to my keyboard, his eyes fixed on the intricate web of transaction nodes glowing on my screen. "You found the leak," Julian said, his voice flat, but carrying a heavy current of absolute authority. I took a slow sip of the coffee. The bitter heat cleared the exhaustion from my mind. "They were greedy, Julian," I replied, keeping my eyes on the screen. "And they were lazy. They relied on automated tumblers and fake vendor profiles. Look at this cluster right here." I pointed to the massive red nodes pulsating on the map. $50 million drained from your operational budget in 2 quarters. Stella converted it to crypto, thinking the blockchain would mask her identity. Then she funneled it directly into Derek's Series B funding round. That is $50 million in stolen cash, acting as the foundation for his upcoming IPO. Julian leaned closer, his face hardening as he processed the sheer scale of the theft. I knew she was bleeding the accounts, but I never imagined she was financing his entire operation. For a tech empire, liquid capital is the lifeblood. Losing $50 million was like severing a major artery. "Do not worry," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I am going to get every single cent back, with interest." Julian looked at me, the faint shadow of a predatory smile touching his lips. The board meeting is in 3 days," he said softly. "Are you going to be ready?" I compiled the transaction logs, exporting the undeniable proof of their federal crimes into a single, encrypted file. I did not just have their money. I had their freedom locked inside a digital cage. "I'm already done," I said, unplugging my security token. "The trap is perfectly set. Now, we just wait for them to walk right into it." By 7 a.m. the next morning, my phone was vibrating so violently it nearly rattled off the nightstand. I picked it up. A dozen push notifications from TechCrunch, Wired, and Bloomberg flooded the screen. The headlines were identical, perfectly synchronized by an expensive dark PR firm. Holt Enterprises co-founder ousted after corporate espionage plot. The billionaire's new wife, or a Silicon Valley Trojan horse? Derek was cornered, and a cornered animal bites blindly. He had released a fabricated, highly damaging narrative to the press. According to his PR team, I was a disgruntled former contractor who had stolen his proprietary algorithm and traded it to Julian Thorne in exchange for a marriage certificate and a CTO title. He even leaked a manipulated audio clip of us arguing, cutting the audio to make me sound hysterical, greedy, and unhinged. I scrolled through the comments. Thousands of strangers were tearing me apart, calling me a gold digger, a corporate spy, a parasite who slept her way into the boardroom. It is fascinating how easily public opinion can be engineered. In mass psychology, an empty vessel always makes the loudest noise. Derek had absolutely no technical proof that he wrote that algorithm. He did not have a single line of original code to show the world, so he compensated with volume. He used public outrage to mask his sheer incompetence. He wanted to drown me in a tsunami of public shame, hoping I would resign, hoping Julian would distance himself to protect Thorne Apex's stock price. He wanted me to feel isolated. He wanted me to break down and cry. But tears are just salt water. They do not recompile a corrupted reputation. I put my phone face down on the marble counter and poured a cup of black coffee. I felt a strange sense of absolute calm. When someone attacks you with a lie, they are handing you the exact weapon you need to destroy them. You just have to know how to swing it back. The heavy oak doors of the dining room swung open. Julian walked in, already dressed in a charcoal suit, holding a sleek tablet. On his face was a mask of cold fury. "You saw the news," I said quietly, taking a sip of my coffee. "I saw a dead man desperately trying to dig his way out of a grave." Julian replied, tossing the tablet onto the table. "My PR department wants to issue a standard denial. A cease and desist letter. We can threaten Holt Enterprises with a massive defamation lawsuit and bury them in litigation." I shook my head. "No, Julian. A PR statement is just noise-fighting noise. It turns this into a chaotic media circus." He said, she said. "That is exactly what Derek wants. He wants a messy divorce in the court of public opinion. We are not going to give him a circus." Julian leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. He watched me with that same predatory curiosity. "Then what is the protocol? CTO. We execute a fatal logic bomb. We crush his lie with raw, mutable data." I walked over to the terminal I had set up in the penthouse study. Julian followed, watching the blue glow of the monitors reflect in my eyes. Derek thinks he erased my presence from the company when he forced me to sign that IP transfer. But he is a salesman. He does not understand how version control systems work. He does not understand Git architecture. My fingers danced across the mechanical keyboard. When I built the core algorithm 5 years ago, I didn't just save files to a hard drive. I committed every single line of code to a secure distributed repository. Every commit has a cryptographic SHA-1 hash. It is a digital fingerprint that includes the exact timestamp, the author's credentials, and the precise changes made to the code. When I pulled up the master repository logs from a hidden backup server Derek never knew existed. "Look at this," I pointed to the screen. "First commit, 5 years ago. Author, Clara Vance. Timestamp, 3 a.m. Now, look at Derek's so-called original files. I ran a comparison script. The screen flashed red. He copied my compiled files last month and slapped his name in the header. But he couldn't fake the historical commit hashes. The cryptographic signatures proved that I was building this system while he was still trying to figure out how to reset his email password. Julian stared at the undeniable proof. A dark, satisfied smile spread across his face. "My media contacts are much more efficient than his cheap PR firm," Julian said softly. "Package the logs. I'm sending this directly to the senior tech editors at Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. Let's see how Holt Enterprises defends a cryptographic forgery." I hit the export key. The data compiled into a neat, indestructible package of truth. "Send it," I said. Within 2 hours, the narrative violently reversed. The Wall Street Journal published the raw server logs under a breaking news banner. Independent tech experts across Twitter verified the cryptographic hashes. The undeniable hard data ripped through Derek's fabricated PR campaign like a hurricane. The same internet mob that had been calling me a gold digger at 7 a.m. was now tearing Derek Holt to shreds by noon. His startup's inbox was flooded with demands from early investors. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. He tried to build a firewall out of lies. But a lie cannot withstand a brute force data breach. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Derek. He was calling me. For the first time, he was the one panicking. I looked at the glowing screen, watched his name flash, and simply pressed ignore. Silence is the heaviest sentence you can give to a man who thrives on noise. The $50 million was effectively frozen on the blockchain, suspended in a digital purgatory. But in the world of cryptography, a frozen asset is not a secured asset. The smart contract I deployed acted as a temporary barricade. To permanently seize the funds and deliver the irrefutable proof to the federal authorities, I needed the root origin. I needed the private key, a string of 256 alphanumeric characters. Derek was arrogant, but he was not entirely stupid. When he would never store a $50 million private key on a cloud server or a hackable device, he would generate it offline. He would store it on a physical hardware wallet, a cold wallet. A piece of plastic and silicon no larger than a standard USB flash drive. The only remaining variable was the physical location of the device. I sat in the glow of my monitors, tapping my fingers against the polished desk. If I were a coward, where I would run. I bypassed his personal devices and hacked directly into the telemetry data of his luxury electric SUV. People lie. Their GPS coordinates do not. I scrubbed the logs from the past 72 hours. Right after Stella initiated the massive crypto transfer, Derek's car went completely offline from the main grid. But he forgot that the vehicle's emergency transponder pings a satellite every single hour. I tracked the breadcrumbs. The coordinates did not lead to a high-tech vault in Silicon Valley or a secure offshore bank. They led straight into the dead, burning heart of the Nevada desert, a massive, barren plot of dry earth and rusted wire. The Holt family ranch, his parents' home. I looked up at Julian, who was already reading the coordinates on my secondary monitor. "He buried it," I said, my voice deadpan. "He took the cold wallet and drove 12 hours into the desert." Julian immediately pulled out his phone. "My jet is fueled and waiting on the tarmac," he said. "We leave in 20 minutes. The flight from Austin to the remote airstrip in Nevada was completely silent." And I looked out the window of the Gulf Stream as the lush green landscapes dissolved into endless, cracked, brown earth. There's a profound, almost pathetic irony in the modern tech criminal. They build their grand empires in the cloud. They hide behind decentralized networks, complex algorithms, and encrypted proxy servers. They wear designer suits and pitch billion-dollar futures to the world. But when the digital walls finally close in, when true, suffocating panic takes hold, they run back to the dirt. They revert to the most primitive, backward places on Earth to bury their sins, exactly like a stray dog burying a stolen bone. The great Silicon Valley visionary reduced to hiding a piece of plastic in the sand. It was the ultimate proof of his cowardice. A black SUV waited for us at the airstrip, and we drove for another hour through a landscape that looked like the surface of Mars. The heat radiating off the asphalt was thick and suffocating. Finally, the rusted iron gates of the Holt Ranch appeared in the distance. The property was dilapidated, a sharp contrast to the glossy tech empire Derek was trying to project. As we stepped out of the air-conditioned vehicle, the dry desert wind hit my face like a furnace. The front yard was littered with old machinery and dry brush, and sitting on the porch, panting in the brutal heat, was a massive, aging bloodhound, Derek's childhood dog. Julian looked around the vast, empty property. "We have 500 acres of dirt to search, Clara. He could have buried it anywhere. Finding a 2-inch piece of plastic in this wasteland is a statistical impossibility." I did not answer him. I kept my eyes locked on the dog. "Derek is a narcissist," I said softly, walking slowly toward the wooden porch. "He trusts absolutely no one. He would never bury $50 million in the dirt where a coyote could dig it up, or a sudden flash flood could wash it away. He needs to know exactly where it is. He needs something that moves, but always stays close to home, something nobody would ever think to search." I knelt down in the dust. The old hound thumped its tail against the wooden planks, looking up at me with cloudy eyes. "Hey there, buddy," I whispered. I reached out and gently gripped his thick, frayed leather collar. I ran my fingers along the inside lining. Right at the thickest part of the heavy leather, the stitching was slightly uneven. It was a fresh, clumsy sewing job. I pulled a small pocket knife from my purse. Julian stepped up right behind me, his shadow falling over the dog. With one quick, precise motion, I sliced the heavy threads open. A small black metallic rectangle slipped out of the leather casing and dropped directly into my palm. A Ledger cold wallet. I wiped the desert dust off the cold metal casing. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I looked up at Julian. The blinding desert sun framed his silhouette. "I have the private key," I said, my voice echoing quietly in the dead air. Checkmate. The cold metal of the Ledger wallet pressed against my palm. $50 million of stolen equity, compressed into a piece of plastic and silicon no larger than a stick of gum. The rusted screen door of the farmhouse creaked open. "Clara," a frail voice called out. Martha Holt stood on the weathered porch, now wiping her dusty hands on a faded floral apron. Behind her, Tom Holt leaned heavily on a wooden cane, squinting against the blinding Nevada sun. I looked at them, and a wave of absolute disgust for my husband washed over me. Derek wore custom Italian suits in Silicon Valley and gave keynote speeches on decentralized finance. He pitched a flawless billion-dollar future to his venture capitalists. Yet his own parents were standing on a porch that was literally rotting away beneath their feet, wearing clothes that had not been replaced in a decade. Martha rushed down the wooden steps. "Oh, honey, what a surprise. We did not know you were coming." She pulled me into a tight hug. She smelled of flower and old lavender. It was the smell of genuine, uncalculated warmth. I stood there, frozen for a microsecond, or before awkwardly returning the embrace. "Where is Derek?" Tom asked, scanning the empty, dusty driveway behind Julian's armored SUV. "Is he too busy with that big stock market launch to visit his old folks?" I looked into their tired, hopeful eyes. They knew absolutely nothing. Derek had fed them the exact same manipulated interface he fed his investors, a perfect, glitch-free simulation of a successful son and a happy marriage. Through the open doorway, I could see a stack of envelopes sitting on the battered kitchen table. The top envelope bore the unmistakable glaring red stamp of a bank's final foreclosure notice. Derek was sitting on $50 million of stolen cryptocurrency. He was 48 hours away from ringing the bell at a $1 billion IPO. and he was letting the bank seize the very dirt his parents had bled on for 40 years. Society constantly assigns a specific default setting to women. The deeply coded assumption that a good woman must offer unconditional forgiveness. They say if you are truly a good person, you must forgive. And if you strike back, you become just as corrupted as your enemy. But in the architecture of cybersecurity, blind trust is not a virtue. It is a critical vulnerability. Unconditional forgiveness is just an open port for a narcissist to exploit over and over again. I operate on an entirely different protocol, rational empathy. It is the highest level of emotional intelligence. You do not lose your humanity, but you establish absolute, impenetrable boundaries. Empathy is reserved for the innocent. Claws are reserved for the guilty. You can be profoundly kind to the collateral damage and still be ruthless enough to completely tear apart the person who caused the blast. My compassion has firewalls. Derek is tied up with the IPO, Tom, I said, my voice steady, perfectly masking the executioner's blade hidden beneath my words. He sent us to retrieve a backup drive he left behind. Oh, that boy works too hard. Martha sighed, shaking her head. You both do. You need to take care of yourselves, Clara. I reached into my designer bag. I bypassed the Thorn Apex corporate accounts and accessed my own personal legitimate equity trust, the funds I had rightfully earned as the CTO. I pulled out a thick, sealed envelope and pressed it gently into Martha's calloused hands. Martha, Tom, I need you to take this. What is this, Clara? Martha asked, on her brow furrowing in confusion as she felt the heavy weight of the envelope. It is a completely anonymous cashier's check, enough to clear the mortgage on this ranch and keep it running for the next 20 years, I explained, holding her gaze. The bank will never bother you again. Tom stepped forward, his pride immediately flaring. Now wait just a minute. We cannot take Derek's startup money. We know how much pressure you kids are under. It is not Derek's money. I cut him off firmly. It is mine, and I am giving it to you. Consider it an early retirement gift. You paid off your debts to this world a long time ago. Let me pay off this one. Martha's eyes welled with tears. She hugged me again, weeping softly against my shoulder. I held her, feeling a profound, heavy sadness for the massive storm that was about to hit their lives. Why, I was not sparing Derek, and he was going to burn. But I absolutely refused to let his innocent parents be dragged into the ashes of his collapsing empire. We have to go back to the city, I said, stepping back and turning away before the emotion could override my logic. Take care of yourselves. Julian and I walked back to the SUV in total silence. The harsh desert wind howled around us, kicking up dust against the tinted windows. Julian opened the door for me. He looked down at the black ledger wallet I was still gripping in my right hand, then up at my eyes. You just handed a small fortune to the parents of the man you are about to destroy, Julian observed, his tone a mixture of dark amusement and profound respect. I do not punish the hardware for a software virus, Julian, I said, stepping into the cool interior of the vehicle. And his parents are good people. They deserve to keep their home. I plugged my encrypted laptop into the vehicle's secure satellite uplink. I connected the Ledger wallet. The terminal immediately prompted me for the final decryption sequence. And Derek? Julian asked, getting in beside me. Derek is going to lose his home, his company, and his freedom, I stated coldly, typing the execution commands. Tell the pilot to fly fast. We have an IPO to crash. It is exactly 8:45 in the morning on the East Coast. In 15 minutes, the opening bell of the exchange will ring. I stare at the massive 8K display dominating the front wall of the Thorn Apex Command Center. The live feed from the financial news networks is completely focused on the trading floor. The room on the screen is a sea of tailored suits, flashing cameras, an absolute euphoria. Standing on the high balcony overlooking the floor is Derek. He is wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit, his hair perfectly styled. He is leaning into a microphone, telling a CNBC anchor about how his revolutionary algorithm is going to change the architecture of global data. He smiles that perfect, charismatic smile, the exact same smile he used to convince me to sign away my life's work. Stella is standing right beside him. She is draped in white silk, looking down at the cheering brokers like a queen surveying her newly conquered kingdom. In the history of corporate warfare, hubris is always the silent, fatal killer. When a criminal successfully steals a fortune and gets away with it, their brain releases a massive, intoxicating surge of dopamine. It completely overwrites their fundamental survival instinct. And they stop looking over their shoulder. They start to actually believe their own fabricated public relations. They stand under the blinding strobe lights of the financial press and forget that the entire foundation of their empire is made of stolen code and dirty money. Derek and Stella believe that money creates an absolute illusion of invincibility. They think that because they have reached this balcony, because the cameras are flashing, they have already won. They think the altitude makes them untouchable. They have completely lost their paranoia, and that is exactly why they are going to fall. I look away from the chaotic broadcast and focus on the secondary monitor in front of me. The command center is kept at a constant 65 degrees to prevent the server racks from overheating. It is dead silent. There's no cheering here, or no champagne. There is only the low, rhythmic hum of the cooling fans and the sharp, mechanical clack of my keyboard. I am holding the physical ledger wallet in my left hand. The black plastic is still scratched from the dry dirt of the Nevada desert. I plug it into the secure terminal. The system recognizes the device and prompts me for the private key. Julian is standing right behind my ergonomic chair. He is perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the live broadcast of his soon-to-be ex-wife. He hands me a glass of iced water, his gaze never leaving the television screen. "They are popping the champagne early," Julian murmurs, his voice a low, dangerous rumble in the quiet room. "Let them drink," I reply, my fingers resting lightly over the home row of the keyboard. It will only make the hangover that much worse. I am not just transferring the $50 million back to the Thorn Apex Treasury. That would be far too quiet. That would just be a simple accounting correction, a silent victory. I want a public execution. I am writing a custom smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain. A smart contract is a self-executing piece of code. It does not require a corporate lawyer. It does not require a judge or a jury. It operates on absolute, undeniable mathematical logic. If parameter A is met, execute action B. Parameter A is the opening bell of the initial public offering. The exact millisecond Holt Enterprises goes public. Their new ticker symbol will register on the Global Exchange API. My script is directly hooked into that global data feed. It is waiting for the signal. Action B is absolute destruction. The moment the bell rings, the smart contract will instantly freeze the $50 million in liquid crypto assets, permanently locking Stella out of her own wallets. Simultaneously, the script will execute a mass data dump. It will broadcast the original, unedited server logs from my garage, the cryptographic proof of Derek's intellectual property theft, and the exact routing history of Stella's money laundering. It will send that data package directly to the digital tip line of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI Cybercrimes Division, and the inbox of every major financial journalist currently standing on that trading floor. 10 minutes to the opening bell. I watch Derek wave to the crowd. For 5 years, I sat in a windowless room and wrote the very lines of code he is currently selling to the world for $1 billion. But I remember the nights I fell asleep on my keyboard, my hands cramping while he was out having drinks with venture capitalists. He took my genius and repackaged it as his own. 5 minutes. The floor of the exchange is packed shoulder to shoulder. The commentators on the news feed are practically shouting over the noise, calling it the tech debut of the century. The valuation is projected to hit $1.2 billion the moment trading begins. Stella is smiling. her eyes gleaming with absolute unchecked greed. She thinks she bought a tech visionary. She does not realize she bought a hollow shell. 60 seconds. Julian places a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. The warmth of his touch grounds me. "Are you ready to pull the plug, Clara?" he asks quietly. I look at the glowing terminal screen. The status reads, "In awaiting trigger." "I'm not pulling the plug, Julian. I'm turning on the lights." The crowd on the screen starts a massive, deafening countdown. 10, 9, 8. Derek steps forward. He places his hand over the ceremonial glass button. He looks so incredibly proud. He looks like a god untouched by gravity. 3, 2. I place my index finger directly over the enter key. 1. The trading floor is a temple of absolute chaos. A cathedral of greed where noise equals validation. Through the live high-definition feed in the Thorn Apex Command Center, the roar of the crowd is deafening. On the high balcony, Derek is basking in the strobe lights of 100 press cameras. He raises his hand, hovering it over the ceremonial brass bell. Stella stands right beside him, her chin tilted up, more fully believing she has successfully bought her way to the top of the world. In my control room, the temperature is a perfectly regulated 65 degrees. The silence is absolute. I am staring at a terminal screen that simply reads, "Awaiting API trigger." My index finger rests lightly on the mechanical switch of the enter key. In systems engineering, there is a fundamental rule about structural integrity. A skyscraper built on a corrupted foundation can rise 100 stories into the sky. It can reflect the sun, look completely invincible, and blind the entire world. But it does not require a massive earthquake to bring it down. You do not need a wrecking ball to destroy it. You just have to find the single stolen brick holding up the load-bearing wall and pull it out. Derek and Stella built a billion-dollar tower entirely on top of my source code and her laundered cash. Today, I am taking my brick back. On the broadcast, the crowd's countdown hits 0. Derek slams his hand down. The opening bell echoes across the trading floor, a sharp metallic ring of absolute triumph. White confetti explodes from the ceiling. At that exact millisecond, my finger depresses the enter key. The smart contract executes. Execution time. 12 milliseconds. Deep within the Ethereum blockchain, my pre-authorized protocol activates. Stella's 3 hidden cold wallets are instantly hit with a cryptographic lock time function. $50 million in liquid capital. The absolute lifeblood of Holt Enterprises is frozen. It cannot be moved, withdrawn, or transferred for the next 99 years. It is permanently entombed in a digital grave. But that is only the financial execution. I want a public one. On the live feed, the massive LED screens wrapping around the stock exchange light up. The Holt Enterprises ticker symbol appears in bright, vibrant green. The opening stock price flashes at $35 a share. It holds for exactly 1.5 seconds. Then, the massive screens violently glitch. The bright green numbers tear and distort, instantly replaced by a wall of dead black space. The cheering on the floor begins to falter. The anchors on the financial networks pause, tapping their earpieces in sheer confusion. White text begins to rapidly cascade down every single monolithic monitor on the trading floor. It is not financial data. It is my original repository logs, the unalterable commit history of the algorithm. The author, Clara Vance. Timestamp 3 a.m. 5 years ago. Before anyone can process the intellectual property theft, a secondary window splits the screens. A high-resolution data map of the blockchain flows like a waterfall, drawing a straight, undeniable red line from Stella Montgomery's offshore shell accounts directly into the Holt Enterprises operating fund. The transaction hashes are displayed in massive, glowing fonts for every reporter and investor in the room to analyze. The roar of the crowd completely dies. It is quickly replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Then the center monitor goes completely white. A massive document appears, dominating the entire room. It is a federal warrant, bearing the unmistakable, glaring seal of the FBI Cybercrimes Division. I watch Derek on the live feed, and his hand is still resting limply on the ceremonial bell. The blood completely drains from his face, leaving him a pale, hollow shell. His charismatic smile dissolves into pure, unadulterated terror. He looks up at the screens, his mouth opening, but no sound comes out. Stella takes a slow, trembling step backward. The expensive champagne flute slips from her manicured fingers and shatters violently against the marble floor. The press cameras begin to fire frantically again, but this time, they are not capturing a triumph. They are documenting a federal crime scene. I lean back in my ergonomic chair and take my hands off the keyboard. Julian steps up beside me, staring at the broadcast with a look of profound satisfaction. They thought they had achieved godhood on that balcony. But in the digital age, empires are made of data. And when I had just highlighted their entire universe and hit delete, in exactly 3 seconds, a heavily hyped unicorn company with $1 billion valuation evaporated into absolute nothingness. The system is finally clean. The live feed from the New York Stock Exchange did not cut to commercial. The network producers were too paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the disaster unfolding on live television. Through the high-definition monitors in the Thorn Apex Command Center, I watched the heavy reinforced doors of the trading floor swing open. A dozen men and women wearing dark windbreakers with the bright yellow letters FBI printed across their backs flooded the room. They moved with absolute calculated precision, cutting through the sea of panicked brokers and screaming investors. They bypassed the lower floor entirely and headed straight for the VIP balcony. Stella did not run. She simply stood there, staring at the cascading server logs on the massive digital displays. Her perfect, untouchable world was disintegrating right in front of her eyes. When the lead federal agent reached her, he did not politely ask her to step into a private room. He read her Miranda rights over the deafening roar of the crowd. Stella Montgomery, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and severe violations of the Securities Exchange Act. She looked down at her wrists as the cold steel handcuffs snapped shut over her designer silk sleeves. The heiress to a venture capital empire, reduced to a common white-collar criminal in front of the entire global financial press. But when Derek did what he always did when a system failed, he ran. On my secondary monitor, I quickly tapped into the building's closed-circuit security matrix. I pulled up the camera feeds for the service elevators and the underground parking garage. There he was. He was sprinting down a concrete stairwell, his bespoke Tom Ford suit jacket discarded, his tie completely ripped off. He burst through the heavy fire doors into the dim, fluorescent light of the parking structure. He was gasping for air, looking wildly over his shoulder like a hunted animal. He reached his sleek, black sports car and practically fell against the driver's side door. His hands were shaking so violently, he dropped his keys onto the concrete. He did not bother picking them up. Instead, he pulled out his encrypted smartphone, the last remaining lifeline to his fake empire. Then he desperately tapped the screen, trying to access the back end of Holt Enterprises. He needed to override the lockdown. He needed to prove he was the administrator. He needed to salvage just a fraction of the power he had 5 minutes ago. I watched him through the high-resolution security camera mounted directly above his car. I watched the exact moment his screen lit up, and I knew exactly what he saw. Fatal error. Root access permanently revoked. He tapped the screen again, and again, and again. He hit the glass so hard I could almost hear it crack through the silent video feed. No, 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 he screamed at the dead device. He fell to his knees on the filthy concrete floor, clutching the phone to his chest. The illusion was completely shattered. He finally realized the absolute truth. He was not a visionary. When he was not a genius founder, Without my algorithm, without my quiet, invisible labor keeping his world afloat, he was absolutely nothing. 2 black SUVs abruptly turned the corner of the parking garage, their tires screeching against the pavement. The vehicles boxed him in, their bright headlights completely blinding him. 4 federal agents stepped out, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at the man kneeling in the dirt. Derek Holt. Keep your hands where we can see them. He did not fight. He simply dropped his phone and raised his empty, trembling hands into the air. He looked completely broken. A hollow shell of a man staring down the barrel of a 20-year federal prison sentence for market manipulation and grand larceny of intellectual property. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap, and the tension that had lived in my shoulders for 5 years completely evaporated. People say that karma takes a lifetime to arrive. They say that the arc of the moral universe is long, and the wheels of justice turn incredibly slowly. But we live in the digital age. The traditional legal system might take years to build a case, to subpoena financial records, and to navigate the endless red tape of expensive corporate lawyers. But an algorithm has zero latency. Code does not debate. Code does not accept bribes. Code does not care about your venture capital connections or your tailored suits. When you violate the fundamental architecture of a system, the network corrects itself. The punishment is absolute and it is instantaneous. I looked at Julian. He was watching me, a look of profound, quiet awe in his dark eyes. And the threat has been neutralized, I said, my voice perfectly calm. The network is secure. The catharsis did not hit me like a sudden, violent explosion. It washed over me like a cold, refreshing rain. The suffocating weight of betrayal was finally gone. I had taken back my life's work, and I had buried the traitors in their own digital graveyard. The war was officially over. The servers were finally quiet. The massive data migration was complete, and the Holt Enterprises network had been fully dismantled, handed over to federal regulators as a perfectly packaged digital corpse. I stood in my corner office on the 50th floor, staring out at the Austin skyline. The sun was setting, casting a long golden shadow across the glass towers of the tech district. I picked up my platinum security badge, or the one that gave me absolute root access to the Thorn Apex Empire. I unclipped it from my lapel and placed it gently on the center of my immaculate mahogany desk. The contract was fulfilled. The malware was eradicated. My temporary permissions had naturally expired. I opened a small cardboard box and began placing my few personal items inside. A mechanical keyboard, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, a single encrypted hard drive containing my original, uncorrupted source code. I did not accumulate much during my brief tenure as Chief Technology Officer. I was only ever meant to be a patch, a temporary security update to fix a fatal error. I closed the lid of the box. Going somewhere, Clara. I turned around. Julian was standing in the doorway. He was leaning casually against the heavy oak frame, his hands buried in the pockets of his dark trousers. He did not look like a CEO who had just survived a massive corporate scandal. He looked like a man who had just solved a highly complex, incredibly satisfying puzzle. "The execution protocol is complete, Julian," I said calmly, picking up my box. "Stella and Derek are in federal custody. Your board is unified. Your operational budget has been fully recovered and secured behind a military-grade firewall. My mandate here is over. I am logging off." Julian did not step aside to let me pass. Instead, he walked slowly into the office. He pulled his right hand out of his pocket and tossed a thick, black leather folder onto my desk. It landed right next to my discarded security badge with a heavy thud. "I ran a comprehensive internal security audit this morning," Julian said, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "I wanted to ensure Stella had not left any dormant logic bombs in our mainframe before she went to prison. My team swept the entire network architecture. They found something highly irregular." I looked at the black folder, then back up at him. "Is there a problem with the firewall?" I asked. "No." "The firewall is flawless," he replied, taking a step closer. But the audit team found a localized breach that occurred exactly 6 months ago. It was a brilliant, elegant piece of code. It completely bypassed our external security, infiltrated my personal executive calendar, and subtly rearranged my schedule. He reached out and tapped the leather folder. Someone hijacked my itinerary. They canceled my meetings in London. They booked me a private flight back to Texas. Oh, and they secured a VIP reservation for me at the Austin Golf Club, a reservation scheduled for the exact same hour, on the exact same day, that Stella was meeting Derek on that patio. The room fell completely silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning unit. Julian stepped so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. A slow, dangerous smile crept across his face. "You did not just stumble into me at that golf club, Clara. You were not a helpless, grieving wife hiding behind a potted fern waiting for a miracle. You engineered the entire collision. You hacked my life." I looked up at him. I did not look away, and I did not apologize. In the wild, the absolute greatest hunter never announces its presence. The apex predator knows that the most efficient way to trap a dangerous target is to hide beneath the perfect disguise of a wounded, desperate prey. I needed absolute, unrestricted power to crush Derek and Stella. I could not do it alone. I needed a supercomputer. I needed a billionaire with a vendetta. So, I looked at the board. I calculated the variables, and I manipulated the routing protocols to bring the ultimate weapon directly to me. Julian laughed. It was a rich, deep sound that echoed off the glass walls. "You played me," he said, shaking his head in sheer disbelief. "I thought I was the one recruiting a rogue hacker to do my dirty work, but you had already recruited me. I was just a line of code in your master script. You were the most critical component of the architecture, Julian," I corrected him, my voice completely steady. "But a contract is a contract. We both got exactly what we wanted out of this transaction. The system is clean. Now, please step aside." I reached for my box again, but before my fingers could touch the cardboard, Julian's hand clamped down over my wrist. His grip was firm, grounding, and incredibly warm. I looked up. The amusement was gone from his eyes, replaced by a fierce, burning intensity. "Did you really think I would let you log off that easily?" I stared down at his hand, gripping my wrist. The physical contact sent a sharp, unexpected ping across my carefully regulated nervous system. I braced myself for the inevitable corporate rage. Men like Julian Thorne do not tolerate being outsmarted. They absolutely do not accept being reduced to a hidden variable in someone else's complex equation. I fully expected him to pick up his phone, or call his elite security team, and have me immediately escorted off the premises. "I engineered the collision, Julian," I repeated, making sure my voice did not waver even a fraction of a decibel. "I needed a weapon with enough payload to obliterate Derek and Stella. You were the most effective, highly destructive asset on the market. I used your network to execute my protocol. Now the operation is complete, the system is clean, you can release me." Julian did not release my wrist. Instead, the dangerous intensity in his dark eyes slowly melted into something entirely different. It was not anger. It was not betrayal. It was sheer, unadulterated admiration. He let go of my arm only to reach across the mahogany desk and pick up the black leather folder containing my resignation and our prenuptial exit agreement. "You actually think I'm angry?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low magnetic register that seemed to vibrate in the quiet office. "You think I am insulted that a brilliantly ruthless data architect hacked my airtight security matrix, rearranged my life, and flawlessly orchestrated a multi-million-dollar takedown of the woman who betrayed me?" He took the thick stack of legal documents in both his hands. "Clara, I am not angry. I am entirely conquered." With one sharp, deliberate motion, Julian tore the ironclad exit contract perfectly in half. Then he tore it again, dropping the shredded, useless paper directly into the sleek metal wastebasket beside my desk. "What are you doing?" I asked, my pulse finally losing its perfect rhythmic calm. I am canceling your log-off sequence, he replied, stepping completely into my personal space. You built this firewall, Clara. You wrote the new architecture for my entire empire. Do you really think I am going to let my chief technology officer walk out that door just because the initial beta test is over? I looked at the shredded paper in the bin, then back up at him. Our arrangement was a temporary patch, Julian, a marriage of convenience to isolate a malware infection. Then it is time for a permanent system upgrade, he said, his gaze dropping to my lips before locking fiercely back onto my eyes. I do not want a temporary patch. I want a complete merger. I do not need a corporate trophy who smiles for the cameras. I need a partner who can hack my calendar, anticipate my algorithms, and burn my enemies to the ground before I even wake up. He reached out, his knuckles gently grazing the line of my jaw. I want to renew this contract, Clara. Term, indefinite. Admin rights, absolute. Profit sharing, 50-50. I will assume all the risk. Do you accept the update? I stood there, looking up at the absolute titan of the cybersecurity world. In traditional fairy tales, romance is built on fragile promises, blind devotion, and naive vows. But for people like us, people who have had our trust violently formatted, love is not about poetry. It is about absolute mental parity. It is about looking at someone and knowing they have the exact same capacity for destruction as you do, but they actively choose to build an empire with you instead. It is the profound, beautiful respect of two apex predators recognizing their equal. It was the most brutally pragmatic, mathematically perfect proposal I had ever heard. I looked at the empty cardboard box on my desk. You realize that if you ever try to lock me out of the system, I will crash your entire mainframe, I whispered. Julian smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. I am counting on it, CTO. I reached up, grabbing the lapel of his tailored suit, and pulled him down to me. The kiss was not a desperate, frantic collision. It was deliberate. It was the flawless sealing of an unbreakable cryptographic key. The legacy system was gone. We had successfully deployed the new architecture, and the network was finally running perfectly. I stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, looking out over the glowing grid of the Austin Tech District. From up here, the city looks like a massive, intricate circuit board humming with endless, invisible data. The world is moving fast down there, completely unaware of the empire that just collapsed, and the new one that was just compiled. Sometimes I look down at those lights and ask myself a very simple question. What kind of paper actually guarantees love? My first marriage began with poetry. We stood in front of an altar, exchanging fragile rings and swearing naive vows of unconditional sacrifice. I genuinely believed that love meant quietly depreciating my own value so he could appreciate in his. I thought that if I stayed in that hot, windowless garage, silently writing the code that would make him a king, he would protect me. But those romantic vows ended with a fraudulent intellectual property transfer, a quiet, calculated theft designed to completely erase me from my own creation. My second marriage did not start with roses or champagne. It began with a cold, heavily encrypted legal contract. It was a purely pragmatic merger of two deeply damaged networks. We came together for absolute destruction. We calculated the exact risks, we mapped out our individual vulnerabilities, and we set unforgiving, hard-coded boundaries. But the profound paradox of my life is that ruthless transparency created something entirely unbreakable. When you do not expect someone to blindly sacrifice their identity for you, you actually begin to respect their true, absolute value. Julian does not want a silent background process waiting for him at the door. He wants a co-admin, a partner fully capable of defending the mainframe alongside him. True, Mature love is not about hiding your flaws behind sweet words. It is about putting all your raw data on the table, knowing exactly where the fatal bugs are, and still choosing to execute the program together. Society constantly teaches women to be the perfect user interface, to be beautiful, accommodating, and effortless to navigate. We are aggressively conditioned to give away our administrative rights in the name of romantic love, blindly hoping the system will just take care of us. But hope is a terrible security protocol. If you sacrifice your education, your career, and your financial independence to build someone else's empire, you are turning yourself into a depreciating asset. You are willingly handing over the private keys to your own survival. When the system crashes, and it eventually crashes, you will be left with absolutely nothing but a blank, dead screen. Do not ever let someone else compile your future. Arm yourself with absolute, undeniable competence. Or learn the harsh language of the machine. Understand the architecture of your own finances and your own worth. When you possess the intellect and the independence to stand completely on your own, you are no longer a vulnerable target waiting to be formatted. You become the architect. You become the one who holds the master key. Write your own source code and never, ever give away your root access.